Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today, we're tackling a question that looks simple on the surface, but oh boy, does it get complicated fast. Is Hinduism basically the same thing as Western paganism?
Yeah, you hear that comparison thrown around sometimes, don't you?
We do.
Yeah.
And we live in a world that just loves labels, loves
Yeah.
putting things in neat little boxes, especially, religions or spiritual paths that feel a bit,
Other.
different from the familiar.
But what happens when those labels, which often come from outsiders looking in, actually hide more than they reveal, when they kind of flatten out the real depth and uniqueness?
That's the core issue, really.
So, okay, let's break this down further. Our mission, our deep dive today, is to really scrutinize this classification. Is Hinduism a pagan religion?
Or is that comparison misleading?
Exactly. We want to move past any maybe superficial similarities and get to the heart of the matter, the fundamental differences.
And we've got some interesting source material for this, looking at the history, the words themselves, the theology. Yeah, the sources really offer a critical look at how these terms, paganism, Hinduism, got constructed and used. We're aiming for a nuanced understanding, cutting through the noise.
Getting beyond those simplistic labels.
Absolutely. And why should you, our listener, care about this? Well, understanding how labels work, how history shapes our view of cultures, and appreciating the real depth of different spiritual traditions.
Oh,
That's not just academic.
no, it's vital. It helps us navigate the world with a bit more clarity, a bit more respect, avoids those easy, often harmful assumptions.
Couldn't agree more.
And what's particularly compelling, I think, is that the very words we're dealing with, paganism, Hinduism, they're tricky themselves.
How so?
Well, they're often what scholars call exonyms, meaning they weren't names people within those traditions necessarily used for themselves, at least not initially. They were labels applied by outsiders.
Okay, so that shapes things right from the start.
Absolutely. It colors our perception before we even begin the analysis, introduces bias. It really sets the stage for digging into some contested definitions, some power dynamics, and actually quite a bit of colonial history that still echoes today.
So the labels themselves carry baggage.
Loads of it. They're rarely neutral. They come with histories, intentions, and often real-world consequences.
Right, so let's kick off with pagan. You probably have an image pop into your head, right?
Yeah.
Maybe ancient druids, Roman gods, nature rituals, something old, something maybe a bit mysterious.
The standard picture.
But the actual story of this word, how it traveled through history, it's way more convoluted, way more revealing than you might think.
The etymology is key here.
It really is. I find this next part fascinating. How did it go from being a totally secular word to a religious one? The word pagan, it comes from the Latin paganus.
Right.
And originally, no religious meaning at all. Zero. It just meant basically from the country district or from the community. A pagus was a rural area, so paganus was just someone from there.
A country dweller.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Exactly. Then it kind of evolved a bit to mean civilian, as opposed to a soldier.
So countryside person or not a soldier. Still secular.
Completely secular. And that's what's so wild. How does a word like that, so neutral, describing a farmer or just a regular citizen, morph into this loaded, often negative label for whole groups of religious beliefs spanning centuries?
That transformation is where it gets really interesting, and it tells us a lot. This religious meaning of paganus doesn't really take hold in the Latin texts until, say, the latter part of the 4th century CE. That's the turning point.
Okay, so what happened then?
Well, scholars have a couple of main theories about why it shifted. One idea is tied to how Christianity spread. It gained ground in the cities first, right?
Urban centers, usually.
So the theory goes, early Christians started using paganus to refer to the people out in the countryside, the backward rural inhabitants who were slower to pick up the new faith.
The country bumpkins sticking to the old ways.
Sort of, yeah. People more tied to agricultural cycles, local traditions, maybe seen as resistant to this new urban-centric religion.
Okay, that's one theory. What's the other?
The other one, which many find quite powerful, links back to that civilian versus soldier idea you mentioned.
Right. Paganus versus Miles.
Exactly. Early Christians started thinking of themselves metaphorically as milites, Christolists, soldiers of Christ, engaged in the spiritual warfare, you know.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So if they were the soldiers, who were the non-participants, the ones not in their spiritual army,
The civilians.
The paganus. Precisely. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it wasn't just a neutral description anymore. It became a powerful way for this emerging, quite exclusivist monotheistic faith to define itself.
By defining who was out.
Exactly. Creating the in-group by clearly labeling the other. It was a theological move, sure, but with massive social and political implications. It helped solidify Christian identity by saying very clearly, we are not that.
That's a really critical point, definition by opposition. So how did this new negative spin on pagan affect how early Christians interacted with those older traditions? It wasn't just name-calling, presumably.
Oh, absolutely not. Once the term was adopted and frankly weaponized by the Abrahamic faiths, especially Christianity, and later Islam picked up similar concepts, paganism became this huge catch-all bucket.
Lumping everything together.
Everything non-Christian, pretty much. And it came preloaded with theological judgment. The assumption was baked in. These are religions of false gods. They involve idolatry. They're fundamentally in error.
So it created this stark divide.
A really clear binary. Christian truth on one side and everything else labeled pagan error on the other. And it wasn't just Christianity. Judaism and Islam also fundamentally condemn polytheism and idolatry. So that label instantly pushed any tradition outside that strict monotheistic view into a prejudged, often condemned category.
It wasn't just seen as different, but inherently wrong or inferior.
Exactly. That inferiority was key. And this whole intellectual framework, it stems from what scholars call prophetic monotheism.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It fundamentally desacralizes the cosmos. Think about that phrase. It means the divine gets concentrated exclusively in one God who is outside of the universe, separate from nature.
So God created the world, but isn't in the world in that sense.
Right. God is transcendent, extra-cosmic. Nature becomes creation, maybe God's handiwork, but not inherently divine itself. This was a massive shift from many older views.
How so? What was the alternative view?
Well, many ancient traditions fall under what you might call cosmic religion or universalism. These traditions tend to see the sacred in manifestations of cosmic order, cosmic power, cosmic beauty.
So divinity within nature.
Exactly, or intertwined with it. Rivers, mountains, the sun, the moon, animals, they could all be seen as sacred, as expressions or embodiments of the divine. Nature wasn't just a backdrop, it was alive with spiritual presence.
That's a fundamental difference in worldview.
Huge. So this raises a really important question. How does this basic difference, God outside nature versus God in nature, affect how religions get classified?
It means the classification itself isn't objective.
Not at all. It shows the labeling process, calling something pagan, wasn't just neutral anthropology. It was a theological act, a polemical act, designed to assert the superiority of one specific view of God by creating this negative category for everything else. It wasn't about understanding diverse beliefs. It was about defining them in relation to, and usually beneath, prophetic monotheism, establishing dominance, really.
Okay, so we've traced the word pagan from neutral origins to this weaponized religious category. But what did paganism actually look like historically before its modern revival?
Right, good question. When we talk about ancient European paganism, say the Romans, Greeks, Celts, Norse, the first thing to grasp is that it wasn't one religion.
Not monolithic.
Not at all. It was incredibly diverse. Think distinct pantheons, different myths, localized cults and practices. What they often shared was polytheism, belief in many gods and goddesses and rituals, often deeply connected to nature, to the seasons, agricultural cycles.
It was part of everyday life.
Absolutely. Spirituality wasn't separate. It influenced farming, festivals, family events, even politics. Think of Roman state rituals or Greek oracle consultations. These practices built strong community bonds. But as Christianity spread, these traditions were pushed aside, labeled heretical, and eventually most of them faded or went underground.
Until the modern era where we see this term pagan being reclaimed.
Exactly. Fast forward to the 20th and 21st centuries, and you get neo-paganism. Again, hugely diverse, Wicca, Druidry, heathenry, many paths, but often they share things like being anti-dogmatic.
No strict rules or creed.
Right. A deep reverence for nature, often seeing the earth itself as sacred, a pluralistic view of divinity, maybe many gods, maybe divinity within everything, and it's very practice-oriented, focused on personal experience, ritual connection, rather than rigid theology.
And how do they view the gods?
It varies hugely. Some see them as distinct beings. Others view them more metaphorically, like Jungian archetypes, psychological symbols, or personifications of natural forces. Some neo-pagans might even be agnostic or atheistic in a traditional sense.
Interesting. So it's very fluid.
Extremely fluid, eclectic, often highly individual, and often quite compatible with a scientific worldview, unlike some traditional religions. This modern reclamation just highlights again how unstable and evolving pagan is as a term.
So let's try to sum up that journey for paganists.
Okay.
Before the 4th century CE, totally neutral. Country dwellers, civilian, no religious whiff.
Right.
4th century CE, bam, it becomes religious. Used by Christians for non-Christians, often negatively. The other to their soldiers of Christ.
T-shift.
Middle Ages through the colonial era, it explodes into this massive umbrella term for basically any non-Abrahamic faith. Carries heavy baggage, false gods, primitive, justification for conquest and
The
conversion.
weaponized phase.
And then modern era,
Yeah.
a total flip. Reclaimed by various groups as a positive self-identifier. Nature-focused, non-dogmatic spirituality. From slur to chosen identity.
A remarkable trajectory for one word.
It really is. And this whole shifting history, this instability, makes applying it to a completely different tradition, like Hinduism. Well, it feels problematic right from the start, doesn't it?
Deeply problematic. You're trying to fit something vast and unique into a box that was built for entirely different purposes, and often hostile ones at that.
Okay, so now let's pivot to Hinduism. And here we find a really striking parallel with pagans, actually.
In what way?
Well, just like pagan, the word Hinduism itself isn't what the people within that tradition originally called it. It's another one of these external labels.
Ah, another exonym. That's crucial.
It really is. So what did adherents call it? The term often used from within is Sanatana Dharma,
Which means,
roughly the eternal Dharma, or the eternal way of life,
yeah,
which already sounds quite different from a Doism, doesn't it? It suggests something timeless, a path, a way of being, more than a fixed religion.
yeah, way of life captures something broader. So where did Hindu come from then?
It started geographically. Persians, then later Muslim invaders, used Hindu to refer to the people living beyond the Indus River, the Sindhu River.
So purely geographical, like calling someone European.
Exactly. Just meant people from that region. But over time, especially when European colonizers arrived, that geographical term got repurposed. It was given a specific religious meaning.
How did they define it?
Basically, a Hindu became any Indian who wasn't a Jew, Christian, Muslim, or Zoroastrian, defined by what it wasn't.
Defined in opposition again, just like pagan.
Precisely. And here's the kicker, the connection we often miss. In that context, the early definition of Hindu effectively meant an Indian pagan. It was a local other compared to the imported Abrahamic faiths. Same pattern.
That is fascinating. And it leads right into how colonialism shaped the very idea of Hinduism as a single thing.
Right. Was it always seen as one unified religion?
Not really. The idea of Hinduism as one single organized religion like Christianity or Islam, with maybe a founder, a central text that's largely a modern construction, shaped heavily by British colonial administrators and missionaries trying to make sense of and manage the incredibly diverse spiritual landscape of India.
So how do scholars see it now?
They often describe it more as a fusion or synthesis. You have the influence of grammatical traditions, the priestly class, specific rituals and texts, what's called orthopraxy or rite practice.
Okay.
But that fused over millennia with countless local, regional, folk traditions. It's more like a family of related traditions than one monolithic entity.
So calling Hinduism was kind of a simplification.
A massive simplification. Some scholars call it a colonial rebranding of this vast, open-ended philosophical and spiritual world. Western thinkers, especially back then, really struggled with it.
Why? What was the problem?
They were used to religions based on revelation, on specific belief systems, clear doctrines, maybe a prophet. Indian traditions often emphasized philosophical debate, disagreement, diverse paths, practice over belief.
That didn't fit their model of what religion was supposed to look like.
Exactly. Their intellectual tools were kind of inadequate for the job. Prioritizing belief was foreign. So they created this category, Hinduism, which made it easier for them to manage, study, and ultimately judge.
Judge against their own standard.
Pretty much, it became a tool. It simplified this incredibly complex reality into a religion that could be compared, unfavorably often, to Christianity. It was, in a sense, an intellectual act of subjugation, imposing an outside framework.
Wow. Okay, so if we try to peel back those colonial layers, those external labels, what is at the heart of Sanatana Dharma? What do we find?
We find something incredibly profound and, yeah, pretty mind-bending philosophically.
I mean, you look at Hinduism superficially, and you see all these gods and goddesses, right?
Yeah.
Vishnu, Shiva, Devi, Ganesha.
It
It looks polytheistic.
does, on the surface. The pantheon is vast, vibrant, incredibly rich, but underlying that, the core philosophy is very often monistic,
Monistic, meaning.
believing in one single ultimate reality. Or sometimes panentheistic, believing God is in everything but also transcends everything. Or even monotheistic in the sense of one supreme God.
So not just simple polytheism.
Definitely not. The central concept here is Brahman. And Brahman isn't just another god like Zeus or Odin.
What is it then?
Brahman is understood as the ultimate supreme reality, the single, timeless, infinite, unchanging divine principle that is the source and substance of everything. It's the ground to all being.
So where do Shiva, Vishnu, and all the others fit in?
They are often seen as different manifestations, different aspects, different faces or forms of that one ultimate reality, Brahman. Think of them as ways to approach or understand the incomprehensible divine.
Like different windows onto the same view.
That's a good analogy. The Trimurti, Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer, they represent cosmic functions, but they're often understood as expressions of Brahman, not separate competing gods. It allows for personal devotion to a specific form while holding on to a deeper sense of ultimate unity.
That's a much more complex picture.
Absolutely. It's a very nuanced view of the divine, far from simple polytheism.
And how does the individual fit into this picture? What's the relationship between a person and Brahman?
This is where it gets really profound. Hindu philosophy introduces the concept of Atman.
The soul.
The individual soul, yes.
Yeah.
Your deepest self, your core consciousness. And the revolutionary idea is that this Atman is fundamentally identical to Brahman.
The individual soul is the ultimate reality.
Essentially, yes. Not just similar to it, but the same essence. This is captured in that famous Sanskrit phrase, tat tavam asi.
Thou art that.
Exactly, you are that. Your innermost self is the ultimate, all-pervading reality of the universe. Divinity isn't just out there, it's inherent within you, within everything.
That changes everything, doesn't it? Especially the goal of spiritual life.
It absolutely does. The ultimate goal in Hinduism isn't really about, say, getting into heaven or pleasing a particular god to get rewards in an afterlife.
Which is often the focus in other traditions, including some pagan ones maybe, appeasing the gods for favor.
Right. In many historical paganisms, the focus was often on maintaining harmony, ensuring good fortune in this life. The ultimate goal in Hinduism is moksha.
Liberation.
Liberation, exactly. Freedom from samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
How do you achieve moksha?
Through self-realization, by truly understanding and experiencing that fundamental unity of your Atman with Brahman, seeing through the illusion of separateness.
So it's a transcendent goal, aiming beyond the material world, beyond the cycles of life and death.
Precisely. And that focus on transcendence, on liberation from the entire cosmic cycle, is a major difference from the often more this-worldly concerns of many historical pagan traditions, which focused on cosmic balance, community welfare, agricultural success in the here and now.
And concepts like karma and dharma fit into this.
Absolutely. Karma, the law of cause and effect, action and consequence, governs your journey through samsara. Dharma, your duty, your ethics, your righteous path. The cosmic order provides the framework for living in a way that leads towards liberation, towards moksha. These intricate philosophical ideas just don't fit neatly into that simple pagan box at all.
Okay, so let's quickly recap those key Hindu concepts because they really show the depth here.
Good idea.
Sanatana Dharma, the eternal way, the indigenous name, emphasizing a path, not just a belief system.
Right.
Brahman, the ultimate, impersonal, all-encompassing reality, the one behind the many.
Foundation.
Atman, the individual soul, your true self.
Mm-hmm.
Tattvamasi.
Mm-hmm.
Thou art that, the core idea that Atman is Brahman. Non-duality.
Crucial concept.
Moksha. Liberation from the cycle of rebirth, the ultimate spiritual goal. Transcendence.
The aim.
And dharma.
Yeah.
Duty, ethics, cosmic order, the right way to live.
The framework for the path.
Taken together, these concepts paint a picture of, well, something incredibly sophisticated and unique. Calling it pagan feels like it just misses the entire point.
It really does. It ignores the profound philosophical architecture of the tradition.
As we dig deeper, it's becoming really clear this isn't just about semantics, is it? It's not just an academic debate over definitions.
Not at all.
Applying that label, pagan, to Hinduism had real-world consequences, often brutal ones. It was used as a weapon.
Absolutely. The history is quite stark on this. That term, which might have started as descriptive, even if inaccurate, became a powerful tool for foreign powers to justify control and oppression in India.
Can you give us examples?
Sure. We mentioned earlier how some Muslim invaders use terms like kafir, unbelievers, or sometimes Indian pagan. That already sets up an us versus them dynamic, but it really ramps up with European colonialism.
The British, for instance.
Yes, 19th century British writers, officials, missionaries, they explicitly and commonly referred to Hindu paganism.
And that wasn't just neutral description.
Far from it. It was a deliberate political and intellectual strategy. It helped build this narrative that Hinduism was primitive, irrational, superstitious.
Inferior.
Exactly. Inferior to Christianity and Western civilization. And therefore, India needed to be civilized, ruled, converted. The label helped justify the colonial project itself.
Were there specific instances where this labeling led to violence or oppression?
Oh, definitely. A really horrific example is the Portuguese Inquisition in Goa starting in the mid-1500s.
I've heard of that.
Their justification for persecuting the local Hindu population, including torture, forced conversions, executions, was explicitly because they viewed them as pagans. The label provided the theological green light for horrific violence.
That's chilling.
And under British rule, too, there was what some scholars call a strong paganophobic component, constant mocking and demeaning of Hindu beliefs and practices in official reports, missionary tracts, literature.
Like the example of the Devadasi.
Exactly. These were women dedicated to temple service through art dance, music, a respected, often hereditary role. The British systematically denigrated them, stripped them of their status, and just labeled them prostitutes.
Destroying a cultural institution under the guise of morality.
Precisely. It was part of dismantling the cultural fabric, justified by branding it all as pagan idolatry or superstition. There's a direct line. The intellectual act of labeling people as pagan provided the rationale for violence, cultural destruction, and taking away people's rights. It justified conquest and conversion efforts.
It's a really dark history. And it makes total sense then why contemporary Hindus would reject that label so strongly.
Absolutely. For many Hindus today, pagan isn't just inaccurate, it's a slur. It's loaded with that history of being used to inferiorize people and deprive them of all their most fundamental rights, as one source put it.
A tool of the oppressor.
Exactly. So why embrace a term established by their oppressors? Now, you might find some academics or maybe some modern Hindus who could say, okay, technically, if pagan just means an ancient, indigenous, non-Abrahamic tradition, maybe it could fit in a purely descriptive sense.
But only with massive caveats.
Huge caveats. They do so with full awareness of the term's deeply negative, derogatory history and the paganophobia it carries. It's not a comfortable fit, even technically.
So, what's the takeaway here?
This isn't just ancient history. It's a living issue. It connects directly to past persecution and a very real present-day desire for Hindus to define their own identity, free from these damaging, externally imposed labels. It's about dignity, about reclaiming the narrative.
And this rejection also points to another key difference, doesn't it? The structure of Hinduism versus, say, the Abrahamic faith that coined pagan.
Yes, absolutely. It highlights Hinduism's decentralized philosophical nature, unlike religions with a central authority like the Vatican or specific councils dictating doctrine.
Hinduism doesn't have that single point of control.
Right. There's no central authority. It's a tradition that, generally speaking, values reasoning and inquiry over blind submission. There's a huge emphasis on personal experience, philosophical exploration, diverse paths. There's a lack of rigid, universally enforced dogma.
Which is very different from the model that created the pagan category.
Completely different. That model was often about belief, submission to authority, and defining heresy. Hinduism fosters debate, multiple schools of thought.
And this focus on inquiry, on reasoning, does that connect to science at all?
Interestingly, yes, for many Hindus and scholars. Some Hindu philosophical schools, like the ancient Samkhya school with its analytical approach to the cosmos, are seen as closer in spirit to evolutionary thinking or empirical observation than, say, literal creationism found in some Western interpretations.
And ancient texts.
You find concepts in ancient texts that resonate with modern science ideas about the vastness of time, cyclical universes, even some argue surprisingly accurate estimations for things like the speed of light, though interpretations vary.
So there's a compatibility there, or at least less inherent conflict.
For many, yes, this openness to inquiry, this lack of dogma, this Potential alignment with scientific understanding is actually something Hinduism shares with a lot of modern neo-paganism, too. Both often stand in contrast to more dogmatic religious systems.
Which again raises that question.
How can you accurately lump a tradition so focused on reasoning, philosophy, and open inquiry into a category, pagan, that was primarily defined by an exclusivist, belief-centric system that often saw itself as opposed to that kind of free inquiry or scientific thought?
The box just doesn't fit.
It's fundamentally the wrong box, a category error, plain and simple.
Okay, so we've really dug into the histories of both pagan and Hinduism. We've seen they're both exonyms shaped by outside forces carrying lots of historical weight.
Right, we've unpacked the terms individually.
Now let's bring it all together. Let's put them side by side. Hinduism versus paganism, ancient and modern. Let's do a detailed comparison and see how well or maybe how poorly they actually line up.
The moment of truth, so to speak.
So let's break this down further. Where should we start? Maybe with the superficial similarities, because those are the things that might lead someone to make the comparison in the first place, right?
Good starting point. The surface level resemblances.
Okay, first obvious one. Gods and goddesses. Both ancient European paganism, Greeks, Romans, Norse, etc., and Hinduism have lots of them. Big pantheons. Colorful stories.
Deities personifying forces of nature or aspects of life. You see parallels there.
And both often show a deep reverence for nature. You see nature personified as divine. We mentioned the Rig Veda praising dawn, storm, sun.
And ancient pagans had sacred groves, revered rivers, nature spirits, a definite connection to the natural world in both.
Then there's that deep historical root, the Proto-Indo-European connection. That explains some overlaps in language, maybe some mythic themes.
Like diva in Sanskrit and tu in Old English, both relating to God or Shining One. Those ancient linguistic ties are real.
So, okay, these parallels exist. They provide some historical context, maybe a reason for initial confusion.
But are they enough to say these traditions are fundamentally the same type of thing? That's the question.
Exactly. Are these similarities deep enough for a meaningful classification or just surface level?
And this is where we need to look at the core structures, the underlying philosophies, the ultimate goals. That's where the real differences emerge.
Right. Let's get into those foundational divergences. Where do we start? Divine structure.
Yeah, let's compare how they view the divine. Historical European paganism. Generally, straightforwardly polytheistic, distinct, separate gods and goddesses. Zeus is Zeus, Hera is Hera, Odin is Odin. They have their own personalities, domains, wills. They interact, they might conflict, but they are separate entities.
Okay, clear polytheism. How does Hinduism compare?
As we discussed, it looks polytheistic on the surface, but philosophically, it's often monistic, panentheistic, or pluralistic in a very specific way.
The idea of Brahman.
Exactly. The many gods and goddesses are frequently understood as manifestations, aspects, or ways of accessing that single ultimate reality, Brahman. Shiva is both a powerful deity and an expression of the totality. The many point to the one.
And modern neo-paganism.
That's more varied. Some see gods as distinct, some as archetypes, some as aspects of a larger whole, but it generally lacks that unifying, deeply philosophical concept of an all-encompassing, impersonal, ultimate reality like Brahman that defines classical Hindu thought.
So a fundamental difference in the very structure of divinity.
Huge difference. Okay, next, ultimate goal. What's the main aim?
Historical European paganism.
Largely this worldly. Focus on maintaining cosmic and social order, getting blessings from the gods for this life, good crops, victory, health, community well-being. Think Roman state sacrifices for the empire's prosperity.
Practical concerns, mostly.
Very much so. Hinduism.
Profoundly transcendent goal. Moksha. Liberation from the whole cycle of birth and death, Sasura. Realizing your unity with Brahman.
Aiming beyond the material world, beyond the cycles of time. That's a core driver that you don't typically find as the central focus in historical paganisms.
And modern neo-paganism again.
Often also quite this worldly, but maybe in a different sense. Emphasis on connection with nature, living harmoniously within the world, personal growth, weaving your life into the world, not usually focused on escaping a cycle of rebirth in the same way.
So again, a clear split in the ultimate aim. Transcendent liberation versus earthly harmony or success.
Definitely. Now let's think about core philosophy and its complexity.
Historical paganism.
Primarily based on ritual, myth, local practices, community traditions, rich stories, yes, but generally less emphasis on developing vast, systematic, codified philosophical systems debating the nature of reality in the same way.
More practice than abstract theology.
Often, yes. Hinduism. by contract.
Built on millennia of incredibly intricate philosophy, Dharma, Karma, Atman Brahman, multiple schools like Vedanta, Samkhya, Yoga, tons of debate, commentary, deep inquiry.
And a profound ethical dimension tied directly to that philosophy, like ahimsa nonviolence, rooted in seeing the same Atman in all beings.
That philosophical depth and systematization seems very different.
It's a hallmark of the tradition, modern neo-paganism. Again, diverse, but often emphasizes personal experience, practice, anti-dogmatism. It might engage with philosophy or science, but doesn't typically have that same ancient, vast, complex, codified philosophical library as its foundation.
Okay, one more comparison point. Foundational authority.
Right. Historical paganism, generally no single holy book, no central church, oral traditions, local priests or priestesses, varied practices. Authority was decentralized, localized.
Hinduism.
Has a huge range of revered texts, Vedas, Upanishads, Gita, Puranas, etc., studied for centuries. But crucially, still no single central authority like a pope or a caliph dictating one single correct interpretation or dogma for everyone.
So textual richness, but interpretive freedom.
Generally, yes. Allows for immense diversity within a shared framework. Modern neo-paganism also typically rejects central authority, emphasizes individual or small group interpretation.
So Hinduism and neo-paganism share that lack of central dogma, but Hinduism has this vast, ancient textual and philosophical tradition underpinning it.
Exactly. The scale and nature of the philosophical and textual foundation are quite different.
So if we connect all these points, divine structure, ultimate goal, philosophical depth, authority.
The picture becomes very clear. The fundamental differences far outweigh the superficial similarities. Trying to force Hinduism into the pagan category just doesn't work. It obscures more than it reveals.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, but the hole also has a really complicated and often unpleasant history attached to it.
That's a good way to put it. The label is not only inaccurate, it's historically loaded and often disrespectful.
Yeah.
Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow. This deep dive has really shown how crucial it is to look past those easy labels, hasn't it?
It really has. We need to question where these terms come from.
We've seen pagans start neutral, become a theological weapon by Abrahamic faiths to define the other.
An exonym with a polemical edge?
And then, incredibly, Hinduism itself turns out to be another exonym, largely a colonial construct slapped onto Sanatana Dharma, this incredibly ancient, complex, indigenous tradition that just didn't fit Western boxes.
Two labels, both originating from outside.
And while there might be some surface echoes, gods, nature reverence, when you actually compare them side by side.
The differences are profound in how they see the divine, what the ultimate goal is, the sheer philosophical depth.
So what's the bottom line here? What does this all mean?
It means that calling Hinduism pagan is just, well, it's historically wrong, it's simplistic, it's reductive.
And it's problematic because of that history, rooted in a Eurocentric Abrahamic view that was used, as we saw, as a tool during colonialism.
Weaponized, exactly. To label Hinduism as pagan is to fundamentally misunderstand its core identity, its philosophy, its unique spiritual aims.
So we really need to appreciate Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma on its own terms.
Precisely. Recognize its unique features. That monistic or pluralistic view of God as Brahman, the lack of fixed dogma, the emphasis on philosophy and reason, that ultimate transcendent goal of moksha. These things just don't align with the historical or even modern usage of pagan in any meaningful way.
It's better understood
as a vast, multifaceted, philosophical, and spiritual way of life. Something that really defies simple classification, especially using categories that were designed by outsiders to, frankly, make sense of and often control a world they didn't fully grasp.
That's a really powerful way to synthesize it. And it leaves us, and you the listener, with a final thought to chew on, doesn't it?
Oh, it's that.
Given how much history, power, and external labeling have shaped how we see even these two traditions, how many other religious classifications, things we take for granted, might also need a serious deep dive, a fundamental reevaluation?
That's a provocative and important question. Are the boxes we use actually helpful, or do they just obscure the rich reality of human spiritual expression?
Makes you wonder how many other labels we need to unpack. This might just be scratching the surface.
It's a call for intellectual humility, maybe, and real curiosity. Understanding traditions from the inside out, respecting their complexity.
Couldn't agree more. The power of language is immense.
It shapes our reality.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this, I think, really illuminating deep dive.
Thank you. It was fascinating to explore.
We hope this has given all of you listening a fresh perspective, maybe challenged some assumptions about labels and the incredible diversity of spiritual paths out there. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.
Thanks for tuning into Sonara's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.